Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Africans. Today, we're going to have part one of a conversation with myself and AC Lang of WSoccer ad on Christine Sinclair and the legacy she leaves behind as she announced her retirement and she'll be playing her final two games with the women's national team out in British Columbia, where she hails from. So, enjoy part one of our conversation. We discuss Christine Sinclair, how we feel about her, and is the Canadian national team ready to move on without her? Sit back and enjoy. And Canadian soccer fans have had a few tears prior to what we were expecting to be crying about, but today we're here to talk about the end of an era. And I think it's best to say end of an era because with the announcements that they made earlier, especially with some of the other players who will be there in Vancouver, NBC, which is thank all those places. I'm starting off great today. See, I'm starting off great, but it's an end of an era for the Canadian women's national team. We have AC Lang from W Soccer. We finally got her publicist, so she's finally back on with us. She's doing stuff with She Scores Bangers now. So now I feel like I have to call someone to call her so that we can do any type of content together. But it's great to have her here. I love the Project 8 hat. By the way, where do I get one or five?
I won a contest. Social media.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you know someone who can sell me a hat, let me know. I need to add to the repertoire of things. But we have Canada versus Australia playing at Starlight Stadium in BC Place. And it is the end of the Sinclair era, but also thank you for your service, Sophie Schmidt. And we never got to say goodbye to you, Aaron McLeod. Goodbye. I don't know where I want to start this because I think as a fan, you knew this day was coming, but you were never fully ready for it and once the announcement came, you never really felt like you were ready for it. When you think about where you were when you see two cleats hanging from Sinclair's Instagram, you're like, wait, when does she? Oh no, it's happening? The tears. How did you kind of compartmentalize that? How did you react to that as you got that news?
Yeah. Oh man, what a night! It wasn't it just like a random weeknight one day, and she was like, bam, posting these like two cleats with the music. The music made it so much worse,
Yep.
and yeah, I guess I was just sitting on Twitter X as usual, and it was hard to process. Like as you said, I think we all knew it was coming. I think I had a bit of a moment after the 2021 Olympics being like, she probably won't play another Olympics. Like, it doesn't make sense
Mhm.
for her. And so we technically could have prepared emotionally, but none of us did. And so I think the whole country, the whole like women's soccer world was just stunned.
I think that is the fair thing. I think when you look at her from her impacts, I remember I think it was because I've told you this the first time we recorded. My first soccer Canada memory is watching the '99 World Cup in Ghana on tape delay. So she's not on that team yet, but when we get to '03, and then that's when I'm first introduced to what there's a phenom and she's young. Cool. I like her. Let's watch this. And her Kara Lang in that tournament. And I'm watching that thinking, okay, we're gonna be good. You are relatively in that space, and I think we're about the same age roughly. So like from the beginning of where you saw her career going to where it has gone now, I don't think any of us really saw her reaching the heights that she did, doing it all primarily domestically. I know primarily in the US because that's where she played, but are we surprised at the legacy that she was able to create on the pitch, or was everything just more so a surprise for everyone? Or we expected it the same?
Um, Such a good question. I think like when did I first notice her? I want to say it was a bit later, probably 2007, because I hadn't moved to Canada yet when it was like 99 and
Mhm.
2003, and so I was still squarely in Germany, kind of taking in more the German side of it. Although that was like not that built up at that point
Mhm.
either, and so it must have been the 2007 World Cup because we had moved to Canada and I remember we didn't have a TV, so I had to go over to my grandpa's house and watch the games. And I think that must have been the first time that I really started paying attention to this player that we've all had the pleasure of watching over the past little while. And in terms of did we expect that kind of career, I don't think anyone expected that from a Canadian at that time because we were still such an emerging soccer country,
Mhm.
even. And so we've all just been so pleasantly surprised.
No surprise at the legacy that the player like that left. I know you had mentioned that. I don't think many of us did, but seeing from where she came, like starting at 16 to where she is now at 40 plus, uh, do you think? I'll ask it this way as well. Do you think as Canadians we've taken her legacy for granted, or have we really appreciated her over the years that she's played?
I think we appreciated her as much as she wanted to be appreciated, which
Fair.
was not that much
Yeah.
publicly. But I think the average Canadian does know who Christine
Mhm.
Sinclair is, and I think that's a pretty big legacy for a woman in sport, especially 10, 15 years ago. There was no women in sport really that everyone in Canada would have known.
Mhm.
And so I think her legacy will live for so much long past her. And in terms of just the impact, it's hard to picture anyone having that level of impact again, just because of how the game has changed, the women's game has changed. So, in terms of expecting that kind of impact, I mean, it's hard to predict that a Canadian will become the highest international goal scorer of all time. I don't think anyone had that on the bingo
No.
card. And so for me, I don't think it was expected. I don't know. Do you think we appreciated the GOAT enough?
It's interesting because when I look at like women athletes in Canada, like you think Wickenheiser, you think Marie Poulin, you think for me, Perdita Felicienne comes up because from a track and field standpoint,
Yeah.
you didn't see it coming from there. But Sinclair is a player that I feel sometimes we do take for granted, just from the standpoint of there's a lot of expectation, and yes, she was ahead of her time, and then the world quickly caught up to North American soccer and then passed it in over the years. So we have the same expectations of her all the time. And this is kind of how I look at it. We've always had the same expectations, but we never always got the same performances. And when those performances didn't come, we were left a little bit from a standpoint of wishing we could have. I think that all changes in 2012 for me at the Olympics because you had the years of the World Cup really coming. So you had the fourth place, and then in '07 when they miss out on that group, they get grouped in that era. But once 2012 happens, right, and you have the semifinal against the US, I think if you weren't paying attention and saying this is one of the best players in the world, period. After that, you cannot say as a Canadian, say, oh, we have one of the best players in the world. We should be paying more attention to this. And then many things came afterwards. And then we can talk about whether or not as the country, as the Football Association, they took advantage of them. They did not. From 2014 to 2015, those two World Cups, we know we dropped the ball there. But 2012, if you weren't sure about Sinclair, to me, after that, you left saying, "Oh no, she's one of the best in the world." Period. And she's a gem, and we are lucky to have her for in this game.
100%, 100%. I'm actually rereading her
Mm,
book recently because why not, right? Why not make yourself cry more? But no, I agree. I think that was a moment. There's been tons of moments. Probably maybe an earlier moment that maybe more so just the soccer fans would have remembered is like the U was it
yeah, the
19
U19. Yeah.
World Cup, and I think that was one. And then also like her early call ups. If like obviously no one was really paying attention to the team then, but 16 scoring against the likes of like Norway, China, etc. I think that
Mhm.
those were the early warning signs that probably no one really, or at least not many, had on the radar. And then there was that coming out tournament at home at the Youth World Cup, the first one hosted in Canada. And so that was like a major milestone as well. And then 2012, as you mentioned, like I think that really, really solidified her. That was probably her, like that was her peak, I think,
Mhm.
around 2012, right?
No, definitely. 2012 was the peak. That is a game where I remember because at the Olympic times, my brother was like, "These are family moments. We're gonna sit down and watch these." So we all sat around the television. It was like Canada's playing. We're in. We're playing the US. That's easy. We don't like them. Let's see what happens here. And I remember every time she scored, it was literally us just running around the house yelling. My mom was like, "What's wrong with you?" People's like, "It's the Olympics. We just scored." And then we would do that, and then the US would score afterwards, and I'd run up and tell like my oldest is like, "So we're tied again." But she knew that already because we're running around the house. So let's hope we win this game. And we all know how 2012 finished, which was still good. A bronze was very much important for that. But I think, yeah, like I said earlier, I've seen her in the beginning of her career. It was very spotty for me, just memories. I remember '03. I remember '07 in terms of those two World Cup years. But 12 was like the first real heritage moment that we had. But we had warning signs, like you said, her and her 16-year-old call-ups. Now, how many? I was doing research over a video I was going to do, which I never ended up doing, which was what's happened to the youngest call-ups in Canadian football history and where's their career now. And it's like, for every like Olivia Smith and Jordan Heidema, you have I forget the player, but she's playing in Australia now. And it's like there's such a variety in terms of where they are at a young age. So it's like it's not the worst, but it's interesting seeing how many people get passed in. Now, when it comes to her, in terms of her legacy, we're kind of going to talk a little bit about the present slash future. There's almost and I think we saw it most with Jordan Heidema when there's this is the next person, right? In sports, the easiest one is like the next Michael Jordan of sport, right? In the NBA, you always see the player comes in, it's like, oh, he's the next Jordan, he's the next Jordan. Do you think as a country, are we content with another player coming and playing, or do you feel like we're chasing that notion of the next Sinclair, that next big player that will build the country around in terms of the footballing community? Or do you feel that we're doing that? Because I know for at least for myself, someone like Jordan Heidema, it started that way, but we're kind of letting her grow into the player that she's going to become now. But earlier it felt that way. Do you feel that with every young new player coming, we're looking at them and saying, she's the next Sinclair? Let's see what she does on the pitch. Is that pressure real to you?
No, I think it's real. I think it affected players like Jordan Heidema pretty significantly over like especially the early part of her career, when she was still at PSG, etc. And that pressure is massive, and it's really unfair to put on anyone. Like you see that with like the new Messi and stuff all the time, right? That just is too much pressure to put on anyone because those types of generational talents just, first of all, I don't think they happen as much anymore because everyone else's level has also increased a lot, especially at the youth level. I think we're seeing that like ultra dominance anymore, at least not consistently throughout the whole youth level. Like recently we saw Rosa Malouf score like all the goals at the U17s and then kind of struggle in the years following. And so it's too much pressure to put on anyone. I think they're scoring by committee for a reason now. Like I think they're kind of leaning into having a different crop of goal scorers and having many threats versus having that one single player. And then maybe after a certain amount of time where like enough time has passed where Sinclair has been retired for a little bit, we might find that dominant striker again. But right now, I don't see where a player like that would come from in our pipeline. Maybe with Project 8.
And Project 8 is probably the best, nice tie-in, by the way. Project 8 is probably the best way that you can develop that. And like I said, I let players develop into the best version of them versus the version that you wanted to build them. And I don't think you're ever going to have another Sinclair. Just like I don't think you're going to have another Marta. I don't think you're going to have another player to the level of like maybe what Rapinoe meant to the U.S. for those moments. And like we grew up with like the Hams, the other players that came in through those days. So I think it's harsh to put that moniker on someone rather than just let them. But I think you do bring up a good point from the standpoint of, I think where the game is today versus where it was when Sinclair started. I think the women's game is a very fascinating game to watch. I think this last World Cup we watched, I think the level of coaching is on par. The level of coaching in terms of players and the countries that came up, we were concerned with, hey, are we going to have 32 teams? Are we going to see like another Vietnam versus USA? We didn't, which was good. But we saw coaches and players who were able to really push their way up. And I felt that the coaching was a lot closer there. But you did bring up players like Maloof, players like, which is, I was looking at the youth scoring leader list, and there are 3 players who are still active on that list, right? For youth scoring to break Sinclair's record. Olivia Smith is still active for it. Maloof is still, and Chuku is still active for it as well. I'm not going to put any pressure on those 3 because I I think all 3 will be fine. I think Maloof, whatever the injury was that she had, really did slow her down in terms of just that, because she was on a heater, and I still maintain, if it not for that injury, I think her and Amanda Allen are playing pro right now versus just Allen at Orlando. When it comes to the identity, right? We've seen teams really take on the identity of Sinclair. As she steps away from the national team, do you think there's enough personalities on that team where they can form that? Or are they still going to? I look at a player, for example, like Fleming. Jesse Fleming seems to be like that quiet leader, um, always important. I don't ever want to say that it's as simple as if Fleming plays, Canna plays better, but I watched 2 games in Brazil, and the game that she played versus Brazil, it was quite evident that when she's on the pitch, everything runs. She's the motor of that team. When you look at the personality of this Canadian women's national team today moving forward, do you think that they're going to continue to reflect that side that Christine had? Or do you think more as more players come through, more personalities, more leaders will emerge, and then maybe we'll have a different one, which isn't necessarily bad, but just a different side to that team moving forward?
Yeah, when I think about Christine's like leadership style and her attributes that she has and how those are reflected, but they're also different in some of those other players that you've mentioned already. I just think that she's done such an excellent job of passing on kind of the values that that team has. So not just her though, like Desi Scott,
Mm,
Schmidt, Matheson for a long time. I think they just have a very strong tradition of passing on these like really important core values, but you are also seeing generational changes in like personalities, brands, even like these players becoming bigger and bigger. I think the amount of swagger is
mm,
increasing. Like a person like Jordan Heidema has a lot more swagger, let's say, a lot more TikTok dances, etc. Same with Julia Grosso, and this will become more common as the players come through. Which is actually, I think that's good. I always kind of like, not that wish that Sinclair was more outgoing because we love how she is and we love her personality as well. But I think just in terms of taking full advantage of all the publicity that she could have had, like imagine she had a different personality, she would have been
mhm.
massive, right? But she's the way she is and she's Canadian and it's honestly a lot better this way. But in terms of replacing that leadership, I'm not worried at all. I think we have lots of like strong characters. You mentioned Fleming, Kadisha, Ashley, also Becky as she returns to the pitch. And so I'm not worried at all about leadership. It's always going to be changing in some way, but I think it's always going to stay true to the values that she's instilled.